Welcome everybody to WWDBTV's series, Meet the Candidate. Yep, it's that time again. Elections are coming around. They're going to be here before you know it. And today I'm actually fortunate enough to get one of the early candidates, and I have Ms. Emily McFarling. And you are running for judge in the Family Court Department H, which is a vacant seat now, right?
Yes, Judge
Okay.
Ritchie is retiring, and
Okay.
I have announced I'm going to run in his seat.
Okay. And you have been an attorney in the family court system for a long time.
Yes, over 22 years.
Wow. And why did you decide to run for judge? Why now? Why? What prompted you to say, okay, it's time?
So there was a point a few years ago where I was just feeling frustrated being a family law attorney. And, at first guess, I would think, it's frustrating because you deal with so much emotionally charged stuff. You deal with people in the worst situations in their lives. And, for the past few years, I've been doing more appeals than district court work and kind of getting a break from the same thing that I had been doing for the 20 years before that. And I realized at a certain point that I love family law and I love helping families, and that it wasn't really the difficult situations or the subject matter that was frustrating me. It was the fact that as an attorney, you go into the court and you're arguing for one side of the case. And I've been fortunate to have wonderful clients. I don't seem to attract people who are being completely unreasonable or bad intentioned. But you go into the family court as an attorney and you're the voice for that one person. And then the judge makes the decision. And so the amount of impact I can have on that family as a family law attorney is limited to just being an advocate for one of them, or an advocate for the children. But as a judge, you actually get to make the decisions. And so the frustration really was having to just submit what I think is best, or the side of my client, for the judge to do what they want to do. And that's a frustrating thing, right? That's the part that I was not as happy with. Whereas as a judge, you get to go in and make the decisions. And you can, the ability to do what's best for that family would be in my hands and my decision making. And I am really excited about the ability to actually have that responsibility and be able to have as broad an impact as I can to make lives better for the families of Clark County.
It as a judge, do you think that you have a better opportunity to know both sides of the story as opposed to as an attorney?
Absolutely. I mean, as an attorney, you hear your client's side and you hear the other side too, but ultimately your job is to advocate for that one side.
Right.
And
I mean, that's what you're being paid for, is you have to represent that client to the best of your abilities. And have you found, I know this is a little bit off the track, but as an attorney, have you ever found that I don't know if this is in the best interest of this family to be doing this for this client?
I haven't, I'm thankful I haven't really gotten that too much, because the reality is that when I've had a client where I think that they're asking for something, or they're doing little things even, not even what they're asking for in court, that maybe aren't best for the kid, I'll tell them.
Yeah.
As an attorney, I have no problem saying to my client, don't do that. Let's say that I have a client who's a mom who tells me every time I show up at an exchange to send my child to the dad, my child's really anxious and doesn't want to go. Well, that kid is picking up on mom's energy because mom's anxious about it. And I can tell that as, sitting there with the mom, I can tell that she has this anxiety about it. I mean,
Right.
Of course, the child can tell that too. And so, my advice in that situation isn't, oh no, let's go running to court to say the kid shouldn't go to dad. I mean, in a certain situation there's
Right.
a reason to do that,
Of course.
but let's say there isn't some big reason why this kid should really be afraid or hesitant to go to the dad. It's just the hesitance that the mom is concerned about. The reality is that if that mom can get control of her anxiety and express joy and excitement to this kid for that upcoming exchange, then that kid is going to be excited about that upcoming exchange and won't have that anxiety that the kid's picking up subconsciously from the mom. So, those little things can make a really big difference. And I don't like to just sit there and have my client say, well, this is what I want to do, and just say, okay, fine, I'm an attorney, I'll do what you're asking me to do.
Yeah.
Because there's so much more to it. And my experience as an attorney gives me the knowledge to say to someone, well, maybe there's another reason for that.
Okay. As a mom yourself with two sons that are special needs, do you think that will help you as a parent on the bench, understanding families coming in with similar situations?
Absolutely. Even as an attorney, some of the experiences I've had with my children have, helped shed light on how to handle different situations. So I have one son who has ADHD, and he's actually thriving now and doing great, but it was a long time coming. So I've had a lot of negotiations with his schools and issues as a result of that. When he was 5 or 6 years old, his teacher told me, you need to put him on medication. And
Because she's a doctor, right?
yeah, exactly. And I did get him evaluated. He was diagnosed with ADHD at that time, and I thought long and hard, do I want to put him on medication? It was very early. A lot of the stuff I read said, that, there's a certain age where it's more recommended. He was kind of at the bottom end of that age range. So I waited a while. I switched him to a different school and eventually put him on medication for about a year. That really helped.
Okay.
It really helped him focus during that time, and I think it hit a reset button so that when he was off it, he then had much greater ability, whether it was the medication or maturity, I'll never know. But, having experiences with teachers who were like, hey, we just need him to sit still. Or there was one point in time where a teacher said, oh, he's just bouncing off the walls in class and getting in trouble. And then the consequence for bouncing off walls and getting in trouble was to keep him out of recess and keep him inside during recess. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's like the worst possible thing you could do in this situation, so, you have having to kind of navigate with the schools and figure out, what's really the best situation for this kid. And, in family court, we get a lot of people that come to court, parents that are have different opinions on what to do for a child with ADHD.
Right.
One of them might want to put the kid on medication. One of them might not want to. Maybe they want to send the kid to a private school. Someone wants to send the kid to a public school. There's various different options that you have, and as a judge, you have to look at each individual family and figure out what's best for that particular family. And the reality is that it's not a cookie cutter result. It's not just every family should put their kid on ADHD medication just because their kid's on ADHD. Some situations might warrant it, some might not, but it's really down to the specific case. And having gone through the ins and outs of that specific scenario with my own son and seeing how important those decisions are to the success of every kid. When you finally get your kid in the right school, you finally get your kid set up with or without medication on the right track, they thrive.
Right.
And so, my goal as a judge would be to make sure that every single child is set up with decisions, if those decisions are entrusted to me, that those are decisions that will help that child thrive. Now, my other son, He has cerebral palsy. He's on the autism spectrum. And, we had, throughout his childhood, he had surgeries. He had to learn to walk again multiple times. There was a lot of time that I spent in and out of doctor's offices with him, and this very specific attention to his physical needs. And I think it's given me a lot of insight into parents that have these extra responsibilities for kids, whatever that the reason is, but kids that require a parent that's hands-on and attention to it. So as a judge, making sure that when parents come to me with kids that really have extra medical needs, that have things that are really important for that kid, that require time and attention, require a mom or a dad taking a lot of time off work in order to be there for them, that's recognized. And additionally, then he's on the autism spectrum. And when he first got diagnosed with that, it was a real eye-opening experience for me. Because the reality is I only really got him diagnosed, I'd gotten the recommendation for his brother to get an ADHD evaluation.
Right.
And I thought, my older son has something. I don't know what. I can't put my finger on it, right? Let's just get him an evaluation too. Let's just see what they say.
Yeah.
And we go in and get him an evaluation, and it comes out with this very specific autism diagnosis that was exactly on point. I mean, you go and describe my son, even at that young age, it fit him perfectly.
And how old was he at the time?
He was probably 6, 7, 8,
Okay.
in that age range. And so that really helped me, figure out what he needed and understand him. And so, I am a big fan of at least having someone come in and do an evaluation of a kid, because the knowledge that you get from those evaluations can really inform the parenting and can inform the court on what that child needs. And now, in his high school, then he went to a public high school, and I go through the process to get accommodations
Right.
for him, both for the cerebral palsy, some physical accommodations, but also for his autism spectrum disorder, to make sure that he can actually thrive in there. And so, having navigated that system with the public schools, to make sure that I'm advocating for my son, make sure that I'm getting the best for him, then it gives me some knowledge in how that system works, and what things parents can do to really make a child thrive, whether it's ADHD or autism or a physical disability or anything else. I think that these experiences that I've had will certainly inform how I am as a judge, and give me both compassion for those families appearing in front of me, but also give me some tools and ideas on things that might help those children thrive.
So, and excuse me, maybe some alternatives that if you hadn't had those experiences may not have occurred to you. So, I just see it as a plus, but what do I know? And we talked a little bit about the differences between being an attorney for a client or being a judge for that same client, and like I said, you can only spend so much time with that client because they're paying you, right? And if they can't afford to pay you for additional time, as much as it might break your heart, I mean, you still have to keep the doors open, and you still have to pay your bills, and so, but as a judge, you don't have that problem, right?
Yeah, so one of the very appealing things about being a judge is that judges are paid by the county. And, as a judge, you don't have to base how much time you spend on each case on how much those particular people can afford to pay you. So as an attorney, I've had cases, often child custody cases, or maybe a case where the other side is hiding money that we just can't seem to get enough information to get at. And I can only do as much work as that client can afford to pay me to do. So
Right.
if it's a case that just really, if I did many, many, many more hours, maybe I could get over a hump on it, as you know, a business owner who has employees to pay, the decision to do free legal work all the time, it'd be wonderful if I had the ability to make that decision and just do that. But as a judge, there's a paycheck to do best for everyone appearing in front of you, and so I'll have the freedom to spend the time on the cases that need the time spent, and not have to make decisions based on any of those kinds of financial considerations.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you have, from what I understand, and talking with you, you've studied about laws in different parts of the world, in different countries, and
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's my nerdy interest is to learn about foreign laws and how different laws are used and how different cultures impact the different laws. We see in the family court, we see people from different cultures and different countries.
and that's why I wanted to bring that up, is because, especially here in Las Vegas, because we have pretty much a melting pot of people. I mean, people come here from all over the world. So anyway.
Yeah. So different countries have different expectations for how you do things, and here we have our own expectations of how things should be. But when you have people who have reasonable different expectations because they come from somewhere that has their own entrenched customs and norms, you have to understand that it's something that's different, and to be able to hear what they're saying in the context of their own cultural norms and the legal structures from where they come from.
Well, even if you don't know the specific law from, let's say somebody from Turkey is here and they come before family court, and you may not necessarily know all of the laws or all about the stuff, you understand the fact that this person has a different belief system that they were trained in, brought up with, and now they're here in another country with different laws and different perspectives, and you have to take that into consideration. I mean, within certain boundaries and certain restrictions within the law. Is that right?
Yeah, so I've actually done a lot of international kidnapping cases.
Really?
There's an international treaty called the Hague Convention,
Right.
and the United States and a lot of other countries are party to it. And when you have a child that is kidnapped from one country that's a part of the Hague Treaty to another country that's a part of the Hague Treaty, then there's laws in place in both countries, the same law in both countries, that provide a mechanism and a procedure for the left behind parent to ask for the return of their child back to their home country. And so I've done a lot of those cases, and in those cases, one of the elements that you have to look at, so if I would be representing someone here in Nevada,
Right.
who had their child
What
brought.
But you're talking about when the other parent takes the child.
Well, I would
Not
represent either side.
No. But what I'm saying is, you're not talking about a child who's been kidnapped. You're talking about a child who's been taken by the
A
other
parent.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
so-
I just wanted to clarify
Yes,
that.
not kidnapped by a third party
Okay.
necessarily, but when one parent takes the child away from the other
Right.
parent, and the other parent is still in their home country, and that child has been brought to Nevada by one of the parents. And I've done a lot of cases, whether I'm representing the person who brought the child to Nevada or the person who was left behind. But those cases, then you have to look at the laws, the child custody laws in that home country, in order to properly analyze how to handle the facts and the situation of that particular case. And so, I find it very interesting to have learned about the custody laws in a lot of different countries through those cases. I'm also a member of the IAFL, which is the International Association of Family Lawyers, and That's an organization of the top family law attorneys around the world. And we have conferences, and I've had an opportunity to learn a lot about, different laws in different countries that apply in family law specifically through that as well.
Okay, so let's get back to the kidnapping by the parent a little bit. I have a question there that, as an attorney, you are bound by, or you're limited by the letter of the law, and you can only do so much. As a judge, would you have any more leeway in deciding? In other words, if the law says, well, this parent gets this child back, but as a judge, in your consideration or your opinion, that's not what's best for the child? In other words, if they're going to being taken to a foreign country where they have no idea about the language or the customs or anything like that, that's got to be difficult for the child. And do you have any leeway there, or?
Yes, I mean the nice thing is that our law, it gives leeway to judges. So
Okay.
In most family law types of cases, a district court judge has an enormous amount of discretion to do what they think is the correct result, as long as it's consistent with the law. So a judge has the authority to decide who's lying and who's telling the truth,
Okay.
and to decide which facts are more important than other facts, as long as it's consistent with the law. And in Nevada,
And when you say consistent with the law, you're talking about the spirit of the law or the letter of the law?
I mean, both.
Okay.
Both. But
Okay.
the big thing is, in Nevada, our overriding principle in child custody cases is that you have to make custody decisions that are in the best interest of the child.
Okay.
Right? And that is something that, we all have a common sense understanding of what that means. And it means what you think it means, right? It means
Right.
what's best for this kid. Now, we do also have statutes that list out a list of factors that the court can or should consider when analyzing what the best interest of that child is. But there's also a catch-all at the end, that's, and anything else. And we have a case in Nevada from a long time ago. Actually, it was a case of mine that I won, where we're also directed to not only look at that list of factors, but to look at things that are specific to that family, that are specific to the people in that particular case, in order to decide what's in the best interest of that child. And so the law on child custody is never going to require that a judge do something that they don't think is best for that kid, because that's the number one thing. And if the factors don't really add up the same way, if the factors don't really apply to that situation, but there's something big and clear that does apply, well, then that's what you need to be looking at. The case that really highlighted, you need to be looking at the specific case when you're analyzing the best interest of a kid. I had a client who the parties had settled custody, but we were just fighting over visitation. And he was an American contractor in Africa, and he had proposed that his visitation, the child come to Rwanda to have visits. And at that time, actually, it wasn't even as far off as it is now, but there are a lot of people that still had in their head that there had been a lot of conflict in Rwanda.
Right.
And I think the judge did too. I think he kind of had this impression in his head of, oh, no, we're not going to go send a kid to Rwanda. And even though through the trial I had presented an enormous amount of evidence that it actually was the safe place, my client had done a lot of research. He'd made very good plans. He was very organized in putting on this is the right location in Central Africa for me to have visitation with this kid. And Part of the evidence was that the mom and the dad had traveled to Africa with the kid previously, that the mom didn't think that the dad was a kidnapping risk. There wasn't any concern about, her sending the kid and the dad keeping him. There really wasn't anything other than the mom saying, no, I don't want it, but not really good reasons. And so I appealed that decision. So the judge said no, that the visits had to be only in the United States, despite this family's history that was very international. And so on appeal, then the published decision that's law that applies to all families in Nevada, really directed our family courts to look at really what's in the best interest of that particular kid and the situation of that family, not just check of the listed factors in the statute.
So is that part of why you got more into the appeals side?
I've started doing appeals probably as soon as I was doing family law in Nevada, the first few years I started taking appeals cases in family law as well. I've had over 50 appeals in my experience, and 11 of those are published decisions that now are law. The law on published decisions applies to everybody in Nevada, not just the parties of that particular case. And so it's something that I've been doing, but as time went on, I've been doing more and more and more of them. And I really love doing appellate work, number one, because it can result in these amazing decisions that can improve the law for everyone. But also it's a situation where you focus a lot more on, what is the law and how does the law apply to this particular case.
Well, and excuse me, when a judge makes a decision, and every decision that a judge makes, or any trial, whether it's family court or whatever, you can appeal it, right? Are there any instances where, and let's stick with family court, are there any instances where, you go into court, whether you're the attorney for whatever side, and you go into court and the judge makes a decision, is there any reason why you cannot appeal that decision?
Not exactly. So there's two different mechanisms to appeal a family court decision. One of them is like our standard appeal, right? It's the normal type of appeal. So when you have a final order in family court, then you can appeal that final order through the filing of a notice of appeal within 30 days of the notice of the entry of that order that you're appealing. So that's the standard one. And then if you have temporary orders, so temporary orders, you can't just appeal those on their own. Now you can roll temporary orders into your appeal of the final orders. So things that happened along the way in the case that need to be appealed when you actually do an appeal of the final order, you can include those temporary orders in that appeal. But if you just have a temporary order that you want to appeal, you have to do it through a process that's called a writ. And that writ takes that temporary order up to be reviewed right away. They're called extraordinary writs because they're not very common. They're relief that is extraordinary, right? So, basically you got to do something now during these proceedings to kind of stop what's going on or make a certain thing happen in this case at this point in time. So those are the two mechanisms. So the answer is yes, pretty much everything is appealable as long as you're using the correct mechanism at the correct time for it.
So when a judge makes a decision in a case, there can be a lot of factors in there that maybe the judge thought about this, but they didn't think about this. Oh, that's just a little tiny detail, that's not important or whatever. Is that, how is that, as an attorney or as a judge, how do you ensure that you got all the bases covered?
Um, I mean, the best way to make sure all the bases are covered is for both parties or attorneys, if they have attorneys, to make sure that all of the pertinent information and evidence is presented to that judge, and then for a judge to actually consider everything that's relevant to that case in making that decision. I mean, our family courts are pretty overburdened
Yeah.
right now. There was a request to get more judges that got denied in the legislature this last session, and so our family court judges have very heavy caseloads, and it takes a lot of time management and prioritizing to make sure that as a judge in family court, you're getting the information you need to make the best decisions. And so it's a difficult thing to do, but I mean, it's families and it's children, and that's the number one thing that has to be paid attention to. So I think in order for a family court judge to really be able to do what's best for the families in front of them, they have to keep up with their cases. They have to manage their time well, to make sure that they're able to spend the time getting the information that they need, instead of spending time on administrative things, or things that might I don't know, you call a waste of time or something.
Yeah.
When you don't have unlimited amounts of time because of the enormous caseloads.
But as a judge, you pretty much depend on the attorneys to provide you with all of the information that you need.
Yeah, in cases that have attorneys, I mean, it really is on
Yeah.
those attorneys to make sure that they're presenting that information. I mean, a lot of the cases that go in front of the family court, nobody has attorneys in those cases.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but it's a lot of them.
Well,
and it's something that as a judge, then you have to be able to know how to get the information from people who aren't attorneys. Not everybody's good at expressing themselves and knowing what the judge needs to hear.
Yeah, knowing what's important and what's not important.
Yeah.
And because that can waste your time as a judge as well, is, okay, well, that's great, but that's irrelevant. What your
Yeah.
sister had for lunch yesterday has nothing to do with this case.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fine art, I think, as a judge, to be able to figure out how to facilitate the parties who are unrepresented telling you the things that you need to know, without being rude and cutting them off when they're telling you stuff that isn't really necessary to your decision. I mean, it's a fine dance to make sure you're getting that information,
Yeah.
but not too much information, because you really don't have an unlimited amount of time to spend on every single case. And so, it's something that every judge needs to be paying attention to. What do you need, and how much time are you giving these people to make sure that you hear what they need to say.
So these people that are coming in without an attorneys, that are trying to represent themselves, are there resources out there is there information that can be given to them before they get started, so that they know where they can go to get help or resources?
Some. I mean, we have the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada has classes that they teach to people representing themselves. The Self-Help Center at the family courts.
I mean, are the courts informing the families of these resources, or do they just hope that they find them on their own?
I don't know, actually, because I'm an attorney. I show up as an attorney. They're not telling me. I don't know. I teach this class, a trial prep class for legal aid, and some people will ask me those kinds of questions sometimes, like, is the judge going to tell me this when I show up? And I'm
Right.
like, I don't know, because they don't need to tell me. They don't tell me.
Right.
I don't know. I think...
Is that a question that a judge should ask? Those people come in unrepresented. Is that something as a judge that you might think might be a good idea? I don't know. I'm asking.
I mean, the Self-Help Center is available. I don't know if the judges direct people to the Self-Help Center.
I mean, is there a bulletin board up there in the courthouse that here's some resources.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. There's information available
Okay.
at the family court, in the family court building,
Okay.
and there's definitely information to for people who are trying to represent themselves but want to make sure that they're doing
Okay.
it correctly. And there's forms online on the Self Help Center too. I mean, it's
Oh,
an
okay.
amazing resource. There's tons and tons of information, directions, forms. If someone's wants to do it themselves, they certainly can. They just want to make sure that they're getting the right information to the judge in the right format.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I have a note here, efficiency. To make the courts more efficient, or make a judge more efficient, or an attorney more efficient. What things do you think are important to help create that kind of an environment in the family court system?
Well, so I think efficiency is maybe one of the most important attributes in a family court judge. I mean, there's a lot of things that are important, but because the caseload is so high, a family court judge has to be efficient, because if you have a family that appears in family court and the judge doesn't have any trial dates for a year, that family is going to be hanging in limbo for a year. And that is a disservice to everyone. If you have a family that is remaining in this state of conflict for an extended amount of time.
And God knows what can happen in a year's time.
Yeah.
The what they came in here for today, a year from now could be irrelevant, and it could be a whole completely different case.
Oh yes, I've had those a lot. So many times because I do appeals, actually,
Right.
You'll have a situation, I'll take it up on appeal, it'll come back down, and let's say the decision is that, we won, we got the original decision reversed, and the thing that has to happen next is that the district court judge has to have a new trial. But let's say now maybe we have a different district court judge that got assigned in the meantime, or maybe the same judge, but now it's like 2 years later, and the situation that we were at originally is now completely different. And
Right.
so now you're going into go back and do over this piece, but I mean, you're dealing with different people, different age children, different situations. It's time, the passage of time is a really important thing when you're looking at family court.
Are there any types of? I mean, a lot of courts have diversion programs, like drug diversion programs, or military, or veterans, or does the family court
Yes.
system have anything like that might, that could help reduce that load, that caseload?
I don't know if it reduces that caseload, but there are some specialty programs that different judges have developed in the family court, that can help with very specific issues.
Okay.
And that can be really useful, when you're actually having someone who's knowledgeable about a specific issue, whether it's a kid with autism, someone with a gambling addiction,
Right.
Those specific types of things, having a program that is focused on those specific things.
We talked about a number of times about the best interest of the children, and that's key to everything that the judge is supposed to decide. I don't care how old a child is, seeing that conflict or going through that conflict between parents has got to have a serious impact on these children.
Yes, I truly believe that one of the worst things for a child is to witness their parents in conflict, right? And if you're looking at witnessing parents in conflict over an extended period of time, then it just compounds the negative impact that it can have on a child. So I think as a family law attorney, for sure, and definitely as a family court judge, there's a goal to make sure that any family reaches a resolution where they're out of conflict as efficiently, as quickly as possible. So when you leave parents in this limbo state where their case is open, they still have a trial date pending, then there's this edge of conflict going on. Additionally, if you have, a judge can make orders that can amplify conflict or can reduce the conflict. And so when a judge pays attention to these small things and makes orders, very clear orders on small things in a case, it can dramatically reduce the conflict between the parents. And when those orders are super clear, everyone knows what to expect, then that child is going to be surrounded by a situation that's not as much conflict. I mean, when you have an order from a family court judge that has an ambiguity in it, or that leaves a critical piece open for the parents to have to figure out, and these are parents that haven't been able to figure things out
Right.
together because they're in conflict and they're
Right.
mad at each other. Then one small little thing like does the Christmas visitation begin at 5 o'clock after school gets out, the last day of school, or does it begin
6 o'clock on Christmas Eve.
yeah, exactly. I mean, little things like that, can create enormous amounts of conflict if it's not 100% clear.
Right.
If 10 people can't sit down and read that order and say, that's what that means, and they all think the same thing of what it means, then you're going to have an order that two people are going to fight about. Because if it's ambiguous, the person that benefits, they're going to see it the way it benefits them, and the other side's going to see it how it benefits them. And then you're going to have a continuing conflict where there didn't need to be one.
Can either one of the parties in a situation where they, like one side says this is what it means, and the other side says no, this is what it means, can they go back to the judge for clarification?
Yes.
Even if they do not have an attorney? Or, I mean, if they have an attorney, that's the easy part, but if they don't.
Not necessarily.
Oh, right.
I mean, you get two attorneys writing letters back and forth saying,
Right.
no, this is what it means. No,
Right.
that's what it means.
But I'm saying,
No.
wouldn't it make sense to go, let's go ask the judge. He's the one, or he or she is the one who wrote this. Let's
Yes.
ask them.
Yeah, and you can, and you should, but the reality is that a judge that puts out these ambiguous orders that cause people to have to come back and say, hey, what did you mean when we said that the Christmas break splits halfway down the, halfway? We each get half, right? What do you mean by that? Does that mean 5 p.m.? Does that mean noon?
Right.
What if it's an odd number of days in the break,
Yeah.
right? What do you mean by this thing that could be interpreted a few different ways? Every single time somebody has to come back to court to try and get some small ambiguous detail in the order clarified because they're in conflict, is time that judge has to spend on those things.
It just clogs up the court.
It clogs up
more.
the court, and then it takes away the time that judge could be spending on something that really needs some concentrated attention. And I mean, with
But
the
to
enormous
that family, that's an important issue.
yes,
And
and how you deal with that is you don't have ambiguous orders in the first place.
Right. No,
right?
that's
And then they don't have to come back
Right.
again and again and again. And so the more attention that a judge pays in the beginning to what are all the details that I need to put into this order so that no one has to come back here in order for me to decide something that's unclear, that that'll compound into the judge being able to focus on bigger things and not having to deal with the minor details because they handled the minor details right in the beginning.
But as a judge, those are the questions you have to ask yourself, right? Is when I'm writing this decision or this order, how is this going to be received? Are people going to understand it? Are there any conflicts here or whatever?
Yeah.
And with, I am aware that the caseload for these judges is horrendous. We talked about the negative effects of conflict on the children's. As a judge, what can you do to help reduce that or eliminate that conflict?
So there's, it's really on the judge, I think, to set up a situation that can reduce conflict. So, a judge can make sure that they have their calendar handled and are prioritizing their calendar so that they can get people in to have trial dates quickly, that they don't sit there in limbo for a long time. They can encourage the parties to settle and send them out to mediation or settlement conferences in order to try and get the things settled that are settleable. But on the other hand of it, if there are parties that are not going to be able to settle, they need to be able to spot that and to make sure that they're making temporary orders in order to not have ambiguity during the proceedings, and that they're moving that case through the system as quickly as possible. So being able to determine what can be settled and getting it settled, and then determining what really needs a decision from a judge, whether that's a temporary decision or a final decision, and getting to that point of making those decisions as quickly as possible in light of the procedural requirements and the information needed to get to that point. Because ultimately, if people can settle a case, then there is way more ability for those parents to be able to co-parent in the future, because the act of actually going to trial and having to put on a case against that other parent, there's a bit of that co-parenting ability gets destroyed through the act of going to court and the act of going to trial. Well, it's an adversarial
situation. I mean, that's why you're going to court, is that, I have to win,
Yeah.
and they have to lose.
Yeah.
Instead of maybe we can both win a little bit.
Exactly. And unfortunately, it's a tough call for a judge of, do I send these people out and see if they can settle it, or do I try and get them to a resolution that's decided by the judge as quickly as possible? And so a judge really needs to be able to spot very early on in the case, and make sure that they're doing things that set a case up that can settle, to be able to settle. And if it's a case that is not going to settle, that they set it up to reach a resolution as efficiently as possible.
So can the judge, you mentioned temporary orders, is that something a judge does that, okay, so Mr. and Mrs. Smith, while we're, going through this, whatever, this trial and whatever, I want to make sure that you don't do this and you do this.
Yes.
Is that what a temporary order is? I need to make sure that through these proceedings, you're following this and you're following this and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yes. So early on in a divorce or a child custody case, it's really common for one side to file a motion, or even without a motion, there's a case management conference hearing that happens early in the case, and the judge can make temporary orders. And so if it's the physical custody, the visitation schedule, the holiday and vacation visitation schedule, child support, alimony, who has to pay what bills, who gets to stay in the house, if someone has to move, who's going to pay for them to move, who gets possession of which car. All of those are things that the court can and usually does make temporary orders to get through the proceedings, or even like selling a house, putting a house up for sale, selling vehicles, things like that, so that everyone knows how to act and what needs to be happening during the proceedings. And then those temporary orders, they're always modifiable if they need to be during the proceedings, but they also can be corrected, I guess, in the final orders. So if there's some temporary order that kind of tips one side a little heavy, and then when the full evidence comes out, the judge can kind of balance out for something that maybe gave one side more access to money during the proceedings, or something like that.
Cool. And so you still want to be a judge, huh?
Absolutely.
I admire the fact that you want to do this. I think I mentioned earlier before this started, there's no way I could be a judge. It has got to be a heavy burden, and it has to be something that you got to have a lot of faith in humanity to be able to do that and look in the mirror every morning and say, I did the right thing. Anyway, anything else before we wrap this up?
Nope, thanks for having me.
Okay, Emily, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And thank you all for watching. And we'll come back with another episode of Meet the Candidate. And if you're going to vote, this might be a good candidate to vote for. Thanks a lot.